Welcome to Digitally Creative. I'm your host, Vincent Ferrari, and this week I have the privilege, the honor, the special honor of hosting my very good friend, the one and only Big Al Schulze from New York Woodworx. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Not much, man. How are you doing, Mr. Ferrari?
I am doing great, man. I'm doing great, and I am so happy to have you on episode 2.
I'm very, very honored, and I'm not trying to, suck up to the host here or anything like that.
No,
But
suck up
like
to the host. It's
when
fine.
you
It's fine.
when you
There's no
called
rules
me,
against that.
yeah, when you called me and I kind of knew who your first guest was gonna be, I had a good idea who it was gonna be, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, "Are you sure you want me to be on second?"
Well, see, that's the thing. You bring the heavy hitter in for episode 1,
Yeah, yeah,
and then you bring your friends in after,
yeah,
and
yeah,
hopefully there's like a follow on effect. That's what you go for. You go for the follow on
yeah,
effect. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
no, it's honestly when I conceived what I wanted the new show to be and the reboot of Because We Make to Be, I was thinking along the lines of people who have embraced digital in some way in their
Mhm.
work, either going from pen and paper designing to something like SketchUp or Fusion 360, or someone who did a lot of traditional woodwork and who moved into doing like digital fabrication type woodwork like CNCs and lasers and stuff. And man, I can't think of anyone else, because like some people get glow forges and shape okos. I'm not naming anyone in particular, but then some people go out and they get these massive beasts, and they're like, if I'm going to buy this stuff, I'm going to buy this, buy once and cry once. And you have bought
Yeah,
twice and cried twice. But
yeah.
I love how you've adapted what you do to being digital, even though, I mean, I'm not speaking out of school here. You're not the most technical person, but you pick things up really, really well. What kind of got you going in changing over from more traditional stuff to more digital stuff, more modernization of what you do?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Very kind words.
All
But
true, my friend, all true.
you hit the nail right on the head. It was. I'm not the most technologically advanced person out
Mhm.
by any means, and I have literally taught myself how to do everything either by messing it up. I have lots of things screwed to the ceiling here in the
I
shop.
love if you've never been to Al's shop, one day you have to give a ceiling tour
Yeah.
because your ceiling is awesome. The ceiling of Al's shop is all the castaways, basically.
Yeah, yeah, all the mistakes, all the let's not do that again. And
Yep, yep.
but I think about it's a combination of reasons why we started with the CNC. The laser, Miss Clarice over here, is almost 100% your fault, by the way.
I not only take credit for that, but I absolutely would agree that I
Yeah,
talked you into a laser,
yeah,
100%.
yes, yes. But the CNC came along. We have a very good close family friend who is our in that particular piece of equipment is our business partner.
Mhm.
These are the like you mentioned, these are not cheap items
No.
to buy. Um, it's really weird. A lot of people can't believe that my first CNC is a 4x8 CNC. I never had a craft CNC. I never had a what's the
Oh, the X-Carve, the Shape
X
Oko,
carves
the
or
Onefinity, none of those.
150
Nope,
or
you
no.
you skipped the line.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when we bought Hannibal, there was the X Carve, and then the really good craft or home model units were the Shape Okos.
Mhm.
The Onefinity didn't exist.
Yep.
The
And then the next leap was something like Stepcraft or like those types of machines, like the
and e-
prosumer machines,
yeah, and
basically.
even Stepcraft was pretty like you had to order one from Germany. Like
Yep.
Laura Kampf had a Stepcraft before
Mhm.
anybody I saw. Tools today, Matt Webley or Wembley or whatever I
Mhm.
can't his
Mhm.
name. He's a big Stepcraft user, but I'll digress. So our friend, was the kind of the catalyst in pushing me into such a large machine. But my main reason for it was uh, I'm not that good a hand tool worker.
No
I'm
way.
really not. Getting those joints
Interesting.
perfect and getting them repetitive was very, very tough for me. So for me
Mhm.
to make 5 or 6 of the same thing was damn near impossible because I would mess one up, I'd mess the 3rd one up, I'd mess the and it was very frustrating, and I have so much respect for people who are hand tool connoisseurs, and I really love people who do a little bit of digital fabrication, and but yet they'll pull out a $300 chisel and finesse, kind of like, I like watching it. But the truth is I can't do repetitive work with my skill level,
Interesting.
and you can absolutely do 150,000 of the same exact thing on a CNC.
It's funny you say repeatable because the first thing that pops into my mind, is, John Perilla and him constantly doing those apothecary cabinets, and he
Love them.
did one with, like, 2 I think it was, like, 150 drawers on it or some insane number, and
Hmm.
every individual drawer was handmade, and they all had to fit in this carcass, and I'm just like, I actually messaged him when he dropped the video. I'm like, "Bro, you know I love you, right? But you're absolutely out of your mind.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no 2 ways about it." But
yeah.
yeah, it's funny you say that because the reason I love the laser and the CNC are exactly the same as yours, and I didn't know that about you. This is very interesting. We've known
Hmm.
each other a long time, and I didn't
Hmm.
know that. But your reason and my reason are identical because
Yeah,
my skill level is not repeatable. If somebody asks me to make 2 of something, I cry because I
yeah,
don't know
yeah,
how to make 2 of anything. I can make 1 really good anything,
yeah.
and that's
And
it.
and there are some people who are in a market space that can take 10, 15, 100 hours and make a piece
Sure,
of something,
sure.
and their skill and their name and their brand commands that kind of money.
Absolutely.
I'm not that person, so I need to make 10 or 15 of them.
Right, right.
And so, but I do take, like, before the show started, I just finished a series of, they're called up lamps, where I did
Mhm.
the carcasses for these lamps for a lighting architect who lives literally right up the road. I'm starting to do quite a bit of work for them. They're really, really nice people.
That's great.
And we spent probably a week and a half, and I handmade the first one, and then we tweaked it, and then we did this and all that, and we got the piece handmade, rabbits and 45s, and the little, all the, because this is basically, it doesn't look like much.
Mhm,
It's a 6x6 walnut carcass, and it stands at 12 inches tall, and then there's a recessed floor in it with holes for lighting fixtures and wiring and stuff like that, and then the top has rabbits where a piece of frosted glass goes in.
mhm.
Doesn't sound like much, and it's not much if you're making one, but when they want to order 15 of them,
Yeah.
so I make it, we get approval, we get the prototype done, and then I literally take it apart and reverse engineer it and say, how do I cut these pieces on a CNC
Yeah. How do
so
I
I
cut
can.
and how do I do it in a way that they'll all look at least close enough to each other where it's like, "Oh, the same guy made these."
Yeah, no, no, and they're all exact. I just delivered 10 of them,
Yeah.
and Jimmy DiResta says, you go to school on the first one.
Mhm.
That's kind of the way, my method. I go to
Right.
school on the first one. I build a prototype by hand. I am reasonably, capable. I'm not a fine furniture builder by any means, but I'm reasonably capable of getting one done.
Yeah, of course.
And that could take upwards of a week or two, and not solid work, but by the time we go back and forth with the client, and the client feels included and they feel like they're getting a quality product, and then I engineer it, and I can produce. The first one took 15 hours, the second one took 5 hours, and the other 9 took another 5 hours.
Right. I
you
th
know
I think what impresses me the most about watching you work and, I've worked with you, every once in a while, Al, I like to say he likes to call in the big guns. And he needs some crazy something with like Adobe Illustrator or something, and he'll
Mhm.
send it over, go, "Can you work on this?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." I like
something with
doing
a
that kind of stuff.
something with a computer.
Yeah, and that's the funny part because I see what you're capable of, And I know what you know as far as, like, design software, and I'm like, "I don't know how you get," and this is not to be an insult, I'm amazed at how well you can compensate, and you're so good at making it work.
Right,
When I
right.
see the designs that you do and it's like, "Wait, you did that? Where did you get that design from? Like, how did you do that?" Like, for
Mhm.
me, if I do a good design or if I do a good engrave of something, somebody will just go, "Well, yeah, you know how to use Adobe Illustrator, you know how to use Procreate, you can make your own art for stuff." And most of the time now, I do. I don't get a lot of
Yeah,
canned art anymore. But you have somehow figured out
I
a
don't know how.
compensation that is
Yeah.
just remarkable. I'm so impressed.
Well, I appreciate that, and I am very. I, I would never. I don't want to bash any softwares, but of all the softwares out there, I'm
Mhm.
using the most basic of them.
Mhm.
And like my two softwares are I have Aspire,
Mhm.
Metric Aspire, which is the 3D version of
Which, by the
the
way, is not basic by any stretch, but
well,
yes.
if you put it up against Fusion 360, it's very
Right.
basic.
It is. It is.
Okay.
I agree
Um
with that.
and now and I'm not listen, it's my go-to software
Of course.
and literally Lightburn with the laser and to the point that I haven't even been able to figure out all the innuendos in Lightburn, so I design in Aspire and export it to Lightburn.
Yeah, hey. Listen, there was a time before I got really comfortable using Adobe Illustrator that I was making SVGs in Fusion 360 because it was like, "No, I can do that in Fusion 360 in a second." I learned Fusion long before I learned Illustrator. I was
Yeah.
way more comfortable with Fusion than I was with Illustrator, but
See, and that stuff just blows me away. Here, this last week, I mean, I've been very busy, so I haven't been able to dedicate a lot of time to it. But Jeff Stein, a weird
Mhm.
guy, another fellow uh, fan of the podcast here,
Mhm.
um, did he did a kind of a grassroots or for the simple guy Fusion
Yeah. Yeah.
tutorial. Bob Claget's got an amazing class and everything, but I can't follow Bob. I can't hardly follow Bob in the
So
podcast sometimes.
so I'm just gonna tell you the God's honest truth. So I took the Fusion 360 course that Bob did.
Uh-huh.
The Fusion 360 course itself was excellent. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know, and
Mhm.
they filled in a lot of gaps in my knowledge. But the
Yeah,
one thing in that course that I took nothing away from was the cam section.
yeah,
So I was talking to Jeff about it, and he goes, "I'm going to make a video on how to do SVG to CNC because he gets in. Jeff's a good dude, but Jeff gets annoyed that I
yeah.
use Carbide Create for for making toolpaths. He gets really annoyed, like that
I can
bugs
only
him. He's like,
imagine what he thinks of me.
yeah. He goes, "Well, I mean, you're at least using professional software. I'm using the included software." So we were chatting about it, and he goes, "I'm going to teach you this. I'm going to teach you this." I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay." And we put it off for a while. And finally, when I got Tweaky set back up in my new shop, he's like, "All right, when are we doing this?" I'm like, "I don't know. Let's just." So a couple of Fridays ago, he goes, "All right, so here's the plan. I'm going to take you through this whole process, but I'm going to take you through it in the way that I'm going to do the video." And I'm like, "Okay,
Mhm.
I'm cool with that. I can go with that." So we chatted a little bit and he goes, "All right, let's get started and I'm just going to go through the process the same way it's going to be in the video. So if we hit any bumps in the road, we'll know and I can adjust the video." Okay, cool. We went through the process. He had me in a Zoom. We did a 2.5 hour Zoom on a Friday night because, what else would I do on a Friday night, right? I'm doing Fusion 360 cam training on a Friday night. I mean, hell,
Sounds
we're
like my kind
recording a
of night, buddy.
podcast on a Friday night too. I'm just a party animal. Um, exactly. I'm drinking seltzer. I'm not even drinking the good stuff. But we went through it and I was like at the end I was like, "Damn dude, I finally understand this. I finally
Mhm.
understand this."
Yeah,
Now, am I going to use Fusion 360 for cam? I don't know. I'm not going to lie, I don't know.
yeah,
But
yeah,
if I needed to do something complex
yeah,
that's beyond what Carbide Create could do, I could do it in Fusion now. 100% could do it.
yeah,
A-
yeah.
and it just it unlocked everything. So it's interesting because that video was actually going to be my thing of the week for episode 1. I think I may have just for the record, we're recording episode 2 before we record episode 1,
Hmm.
but I think it's gonna be my thing of the week for episode 1 when we record episode 1 was his video because it was just so good, and there's so much information in it, and he teaches it very matter-of-factly, very systematically, one step at a time, and I feel like that's what a lot of people need. Like, I don't need that for everything all the way down the road. I need to just have the basics, like, understood, you know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
But
It's like you were saying, Bob is an amazing teacher and
mhm.
full of so much information. But sometimes you just need to hear it from a peer. Is that the proper term? I mean,
It
you
could
have
be.
no idea how many times I've heard a lot of the things that you've taught me. I've heard them
Mhm.
before, but I
Yeah.
didn't get it. But hearing them from somebody who can talk to me with the
Sure.
same words that I'm using, it just starts making sense.
One of the things I found about Bob's class was that because it was only a chapter in the class and it just felt like it went too fast for me. It was like there were a lot of assumptions that you already it was that I was comfortable with,
Hmm.
but there were so many gaps and I was just like, "Oh man, like I don't under I like I finished it." So it was his course and then it was also Evan and Caitlin did a video on Fusion Cam like years ago. It was like a 45-minute video.
Hmm.
And I left it going, okay, I could do this. I could do this. And I opened up Fusion 360 and I was like lost the second I opened it.
Yeah, it's a
And
lot.
it is a lot. And the one thing that's good about it though, like when Jeff was showing it to me, like I was picking it up quicker and quicker as we were going,
Mhm.
and I was starting to jump ahead, and which is I was being a jerk, because he's trying to go through his process, and I'm like,
Right.
"Oh no, I understand this. Click, 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 click," and it's like, Don't do that. Let me go through the process." Okay,
Mhm.
cool. But what I did learn was that Fusion 360 can do a lot of the things that I couldn't figure out because I also tried to use VCarve, which for those of you that aren't in the know, Al uses Aspire. Al used to use VCarve.
Right.
It's the little baby brother of Aspire. And
Yeah.
I had the subscription to VCarve. I had it for a year. I
Yeah.
stopped using it after a month because I couldn't figure it out. I
Mhm.
just could not make it work for me. I could not understand it. I did not. I tried every piece of software, and the only reason I stuck with Carbide Create is the only one I could understand.
Yeah.
For some reason, it was the only one that made sense to me. It's probably because it was so simple. It was
Mhm.
meant for beginners.
Mhm.
And now when I rebought it after I reset up Tweaky, I put in I re-upped my Carbide Create Pro membership, which is like $120 a year. And I was like, wow, they have just done wonders on this software now. You could do everything. You could do rest machining. You can do full on STL imports. I'm not going to get I don't I don't want to jump too far into the weeds on this stuff because
Mhm.
the average listener is not gonna understand it, and the ones that do already the ones that already do are like, "Yeah, of course you could do that, like,
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
does that," but
Yeah.
the point being that they went from something where it was, like, kinda like, "Okay, yeah, cool, the pro version," to like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
is legitimately becoming like, the basic software is good, but the pro
Mhm.
software is becoming, like, legitimate
Mhm.
professional grade CNC software now," and
Yeah.
it was awesome. And I've
Do
been really enjoying using it. It's like, I don't know if I really need to do this infusion now.
you think, and this is, I'm curious about this.
Mhm.
I didn't have anything to compare SketchUp to, but like
Oof.
when I was starting out in my basement, that was the software.
Yeah.
And I never could grasp it. I still to this day can't figure out
Don't
SketchUp.
understand.
It
Don't
doesn't make sense
understand
to
it
me.
at all.
For some reason, Vectric, well, I say Vectric made sense.
Mhm.
Um, I think I could figure out how to do. I do things so archaically. You've met Tom,
Mhm.
and a lot of the commands, and I'm sure you'll understand this. I don't because I don't use multiple formats of softwares. But Tom uses very high end stuff in his print shop.
Mhm.
Very like expensive, like heavy duty,
Right.
powerful softwares. And I'll be doing something, and he'll go, "Why didn't you just do X X12P,
Yeah.
or whatever?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he does it, and that keystroke saved 30 or 45 minutes of work that I was about to
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
and I just don't know about that stuff. But my question is, I kind of had to force myself because of such a crazy investment.
Sure.
Like, I didn't have a choice but to make Vetric work.
Right, right.
But now that I have Vetric on the brain, do you think we as makers have a problem? Like, I'm struggling with 360 because it's not the same as Vetric,
Oh,
or I'm
100%.
struggling with,
Sure.
and how do we get around that?
We don't. I'm not even gonna lie, we don't. So, I was just having this conversation with my friend at work the other day
Mhm,
because my day job, I have a couple of different roles, but one of my roles is I'm the in-house graphic designer at my
mhm,
company.
mhm.
And one of the things I love is that I live in Adobe apps all day long,
Yeah,
Photoshop, Lightroom, and
mhm.
InDesign
I
and
know,
Illustrator.
I know.
Those 4 apps. I love Adobe apps. I am an Adobe fanboy unapologetically. Do I
Yeah,
love that they're a subscription? No, of course not. I'm not an idiot. I understand why people don't like that they're a subscription. But the simple fact is that there's a lot of meat on that bone. You get a
mhm,
lot for your money.
mhm, mhm.
Can I use any other software? Yes.
Right.
Am I comfortable using any other software? No.
Yeah,
You
exactly,
you know,
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
people have tried, and I can concepts translate, right? Concepts
Mhm.
translate. So if you're using Premiere Pro, you can jump into something like DaVinci Resolve and not be completely lost,
Right.
but it's very different.
I
I use
recognize that button.
Yeah, exactly. You know the concepts, right?
Yeah.
I have tried so many times to like Inkscape is a perfect example. I have
Mhm.
tried so many times to like Inkscape, and I can't.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is that most of the free alternatives are designed by software developers, not
No.
people who use the applications.
Right, right, right.
And I truly think, based on the way Adobe apps function, for the most part, the people who use the apps are the people developing the apps. It's
Right.
the one thing, and I don't care what app you compare it to. Adobe software is made by people who use Adobe software because it's clear
Mhm.
that the people had to eat their own dog food. That's what they call it in software development, where the developers have to use the apps. And Microsoft does the same thing. The
Mhm.
reason Office has gotten better was because they really forced the people that use it onto the team so that there were more users and less developers. And once it became more user focused, Microsoft Office is much better
Mhm.
now than it
Right.
was 5 years ago, 10
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
They
Yeah.
just changed the way they develop their software.
Yeah.
And I think that user focused stuff is starting to kind of really show up. But yeah, I don't think you can easily switch software. I think if you get into a mindset and an application ecosystem, I think that's your application ecosystem.
So we
Like,
just become dated dinosaurs, huh?
I mean, it depends on what you attach to, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really does. Like, attaching to Adobe is probably a safe bet. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
People bitch about them all the time. Like, I can't believe they're so huge. I can't believe they're huge. But you know what? They're the standard.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're
And
the standard.
and
I
it
was just having a discussion on Reddit, which is already asking for death, but I was having a discussion on Reddit about this, about OpenCAD, as opposed to Fusion 360. I've tried to use OpenCAD. OpenCAD's terrible.
Mhm.
It's literally terrible.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it is CAD designed by people who have never had to use CAD in the real world.
Mhm.
And this
Mhm.
is someone I the only where I learned CAD? I learned CAD with AutoCAD.
Oh, yeah, 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 in shop class.
Yeah. Well, my grandfather was a
Yeah.
draftsman,
Yep.
and he taught me AutoCAD. Do I
Yep.
remember anything from AutoCAD?
No.
Not a damn thing.
Yeah.
All I remember was, "God, your computer runs this like trash." That was all I remember about AutoCAD. Every computer ran it poorly.
Yeah.
But, Fusion 360 is the first CAD program I've ever used where I felt like, "Oh, I understand this.
Yeah.
I actually understand
Yeah.
this."
Yeah.
You could get pretty far just watching YouTube videos with Fusion 360.
Well, and I can't speak for other softwares, but literally when I bought this CNC, this massive investment, I got a thumb drive and
Mhm.
a YouTube address.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
here's how you learn how to use it.
I will say this, as much as I as much as I joke about how impossible it was for me to learn Aspire, well, to learn VCarve,
Mhm,
the truth of the matter is there's plenty of information out there. That's the other upside to being in a big ecosystem.
mhm.
You know, there's
I was just gonna say that. Like, I can't imagine trying to learn any piece of equipment and not being in the makerspace where I can call Vincent Ferrari and say, "How
yeah,
do I do this?"
yeah,
Or Jeff Stein, or
sure.
anyone for that matter. And
We and that's the good part because this the information circulates in amongst
mhm,
us so
mhm,
freely.
mhm,
Like there's never a time where you feel like if I ask this person, they're not going to give me an answer.
yeah,
No, they're happy to share the information. They want to share that information.
yeah,
I love the thing. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I had my Shape Oko before I met Al. Um, Oddly enough, I met Al. The first conversation we had wasn't even about CNCs. It was about the cooling and heating system in his shop because
yep.
I was joking about, he pointed that he had an air conditioner. I'm like, "What do you do in the winter? Because I know where you live." And he did a whole video showing me his heating and cooling system. We were best buds after that. But, I went up to Al's, I had my CNC and I had a cutting board that was just a mess and I needed to flatten it. And I went up to Al and Al just did the process with me on Hannibal, this monster machine with one little cutting board on it. And I understood it. And now every cutting board that I've ever needed to do it to, I just do it. Like I don't even have to think about the process. The process makes
Mhm,
perfect sense now.
yeah, yeah,
And it's kinda wild, that I had to see you do it to understand how I could do it. But
yeah,
once I saw you do it, I was good. I've never asked you for help on it again. Like, it's
yeah,
like, "Nope, I
yeah.
got it. I understand. This
Every
is what he's doing."
Right, and that's the way I learn as well, and that's
Mhm.
maybe why, again, why we get along so well, because
We learn the same way.
yeah, and when I ask you a question and you tell me, I'm literally picturing you doing it, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, yeah,
Al and I are what's called a kinesthetic learner. We learn in process. Like, that's what we are. I mean, it's
yeah,
just that's what we are. I learned the term from Jazza. And
mhm,
that's what we are. We are kinesthetic learners. We are
mhm,
people who learn in process.
yeah."
I can't learn just reading.
Nope,
I can't. I learn nothing.
I
I
haven't
can
read a
listen and
yep,
pick up details,
mhm,
but if I watch you do something,
mhm,
I will probably pick it up on the first or second try.
yeah. I haven't read
And
a book in a decade.
I don't read. Reading's for nerds. I'm not a nerd.
I am a podcast player right here behind us there, you can feel the podcast I have.
It's true, man. It's true. So you
But
went from
I'm
what's
sorry.
really funny, so this is where you and I were very different though. So
Mhm,
you had your CNC and I had a CNC and we corroborate on that and we both love our CNCs. You love
mhm,
yours a lot more than I love mine. Um and one day Al starts, hey, lasers,
yeah.
look
Tell
pretty
me about the
good.
glow forge.
So, yeah, so at one point, I thought I was gonna have to sell everything. He's like, "Well, look, whatever you wanna sell, fine, but I got dibs on the Glowforge." I'm
Yep,
like,
yeah,
"Okay."
yeah,
I said, "But I'm just letting you know, if I'm selling the Glowforge, I'm probably dying."
yeah, yeah,
Because I'm gonna find a damn place for the Glowforge.
yeah, yeah,
So, Al went out and, when I thought my financial situation was a little more stable and I thought it could fit in the office, I was gonna get a giant laser also. Like, Al and I were talking about giant lasers. Turns
mhm.
out I can't even get one into my shop because it won't fit through the door. But Al is like, "Well, I mean, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna get this 65 watt." I'm like, "Al, you need the bigger one."
Mhm,
I don't. Do I really need Al? You need the bigger one.
mhm.
I'm sitting like the little devil on Al's shoulder, just whispering in his ear, "Get the bigger one." So what does Al do? Al gets the bigger one.
Yeah, yeah.
Has Al now just for the record, with everyone listening, have you regretted getting the bigger one at any point since you got it?
Not once, not
Not
once,
once, right?
not
It
even maybe.
was the
And
right choice.
there was one time I wished I'd have gotten the 150 instead of the 100.
Yeah. But it's funny because so I was, I remember you were trying to figure out between the 60 and the 100. I'm like, don't even bother with the 60. The
Yeah,
60 is
yeah,
the 60's Glowforge strength.
yeah,
Go for the 100. You're not going to regret going for the 100. You may end up wanting to upgrade down the road. You're going to want to go up. You always want to go up.
yeah.
But I love how your first. So I get a phone call when he gets this set up and he's making his first cut. And the first thing he says to me, he says, "You know what? Laser's pretty damn fast." I'm like, yeah. He goes, "Well, it's a lot faster than the CNC." I'm like, yeah, it's a lot faster. So how are you liking that laser life now?
I'm loving this laser life. I again, as I deconstruct things, like I'll see something and my immediate thought is, how can I make this with my equipment?
Hmm.
You know, so deconstructing things and cutting pieces out of on the laser and engraving and like I'm a box fanatic. I downloaded Maker Case, which is a very tiny little digital fab,
Hmm.
box creator, and I just haven't found a better, easier one.
I don't think there is a better or easier one. I think it's phenomenal,
Yeah, I
honestly.
download it, and if I want to make a stand out of it, I just cut holes in the box. I guess, back to how we learn and back to how simple I am in making my software work. Um, and I don't, I, Jimmy DiResta kind of like says things, and I'm like, yeah, that's how I do it. Like, he breaks things into pieces, and
Hmm.
that's what I do.
Hmm.
Like, I just made a firewood stand for as a joke. Well, that firewood stand, which looks like it's an arc, and all this kind of stuff. It's literally a 3-inch deep box, 9 inches tall, and 12.5 inches or 14 inches wide.
Hmm.
And then I cut an arc out of it, and I cut a piece out of the top, which left two pieces of a side. You know what I mean? But I
Hmm.
had to see it as a box,
Sure.
and then cut a circle out of it, and then um, whereas someone maybe more skilled like yourself would open up Adobe Illustrator and draw the arcs and all that and extrude it out and yada yada yada. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
I totally, it's funny you say that because and the flip side of that is I probably would approach it that way.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. That's probably the wrong way to approach it because that would take me hours.
Well, is it wrong though? I mean, yes, I understand the efficiency
Yeah.
and the time factor,
Yeah.
but I think the beautiful part of it is neither approach is wrong. It's just the way we do it.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I bumped into this a lot now that I'm doing a lot of these table number stands for
Mhm.
weddings. I'm doing a lot of tab and slot
Killing
design.
it too.
And it's fun, man. Now that I have a process for doing it, like if I'm taking in acrylic, one of the first things I do is I make that tab and slot checker
Hmm.
in the corner of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Every single piece of acrylic that comes in my shop, I cut one of those out of it and I
Yeah.
write in big marker on the sheet
Yeah.
exactly how thick it is.
Yeah.
When I know I'm going to be doing a lot of one particular style, I make what I know I have enough inventory of. And that has taken something that used to take me a whole weekend down to a couple of hours one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those little efficiencies are what you pick up. But the
Hmm.
reality is designing the initial designs for tab and slot, I'd never done that before. I
Yeah.
wish I could have used some kind of generator to make it. So,
Is
so
there a generator?
there isn't yet.
Okay, I was
But
gonna say because I do it with a little tiny box and I slide it and then I cut a hole and
So what I worked out, and this is really funny because I didn't really understand tab and slot, like the measurements, why
Mhm,
the measurements were what they were until I
mhm,
made the first one
mhm,
and it didn't fit together. And I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong here?
mhm,
Well, this needs, oh, the slot width is the material thickness.
mhm.
And it's weird how things click because it's like, oh, and all of a sudden you just go, oh, I understand this now. And you start like you should look at the illustrator the illustrator file I have for making these is 16 artboards, maybe 18, 20 artboards. And on every artboard is one style in a certain thickness.
Yeah.
And then I just when I'm making them in the Glowforge, I haven't gotten around to making a folder in the new Glowforge app and
Mhm.
then just throwing all the designs in there like quarter arch 0.215, quarter arch 0.205, quarter arch 0.20.
Mhm.
Now I can because I've done the work already.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's wild. It's
Yeah.
absolutely wild how you learn on the you don't I'm not just going to school on the first one.
Mhm.
I'm going to school on the first one. I'm going to graduate school on the second one. I'm doing
Right, right, right.
postdoctoral work on the third one.
Have you had and again, the beauty of like CNC and now laser also is like once you make these files, you have them. I have
Yep.
everything I've ever created.
Mhm.
And I've had people, well, I just got an order, or I just completed an order that I did 3 years ago.
Wow.
The T box markers.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
So I did 300 of them 3 years ago, or yeah, 3 years ago, and then they just ordered another 110 that I just finished. But when I opened up the CNC file from 3 years ago and looked at the tool pathing,
You're
I was
like, "Well,
like,
I'm an
"What?
idiot."
What were you doing?" Yeah, like what the hell? And I literally cut the time by 2/3
Yeah.
and got cleaner, more efficient cuts.
Sure,
You
and
know, so
that
you're constantly going to school, like you said.
that's interesting because that's something you notice when you're doing anything digitally.
Mhm.
One of the big mistakes, like I really love 3D printing. I had to make something for the day job this week, and I whipped it together. I whipped it together in Fusion 360 because we needed a rendering for the manufacturer, and I did the whole design in Fusion 360, and we sent that off. We're going to send that off to the manufacturer next week, just so he has a good look at what we expect it to look like. And I'm doing this whole thing, and I'm like, oh, I could 3D print this, and we can kind of get an idea what this design is like in the real world.
Mhm.
And I'm 3D printing it, and my initial instinct used to be when I first started 3D printing is I need as much infill as possible. I want this to be strong.
Mhm.
What you learn very quickly is that, oh, if I do 100% infill, this is going to take hours.
Mhm.
If I
Mhm.
do 15% infill, which is probably overkill for almost everything anyway,
Yeah.
oh, look, that
Yeah.
print time goes down to an hour 40,
Right.
you know?
And there's something, I mean, I'm not saying that, strength is important, but I think there might be also something the delicacy, the tactile, like it doesn't feel like a brick in your hand.
Yeah, true, true.
There's a quality there, you
Yeah,
know.
and the only thing I've ever found that need like when I do my jigs, my cutting board,
That's what I
flip
was just
jigs,
looking for.
when
I
I
was gonna
make
say what
those,
else.
those are 100% infill because they're very
Yeah.
thin, they're plastic, and they
Yeah.
have to be.
Yeah.
They have to be
Yeah.
100% infill. I don't want any empty space between the top and bottom layers, right?
Listen, if you skeletalize that, I will drill a hole in the wrong place. You know what I mean,
Totally.
it's just that I need it that brain stupid.
But that's, and obviously the focus of, I don't want to say the complete focus of the show, but the kind of the idea for this show is that it's the merging of, digital technology and making and creativity and art and all that. And it's
Yeah.
the kind of that confluence, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things I'm starting to really appreciate is the way that the machines that we use can kind of just drag our creations out into the real world.
I think, we kind of, it's not so much, I mean, there still is, the quote unquote new guys have that argument, the argument will go on through the eons of time
Hmm.
of is CNC woodworking,
Hmm.
or anything like that. But I think as you and I started kind of on the first wave of this,
Hmm.
we had the archaic tool, the archaic CNC experiences and stuff like that.
Sure.
I think I've found the way I use them by doing the work and then augmenting the quality with the machine.
Yeah.
I think digital fabrication is just another tool. It's another hand plane, it's another chisel, it's another whatever.
I forgot who said it, but I love the analogy of, well, is a table saw woodworking
Yeah,
because that's a machine.
yeah, I
And
mean,
I always laugh when and the one thing and, I know it's kind of a trope for people that do this because it's like everybody says this, but it really is true.
mhm,
The only people who think the CNC does all the work are the people who have never used a CNC.
mhm, mhm,
If you I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there are I have a juice groove jig that is absolutely fantastic. I love it. It's the best investment I've made in my
yeah,
shop
yeah,
at
yeah,
$180, right? It's
yeah,
amazing. I would never get rid of it. Why? Because as easy and I'm doing
mhm,
scare quotes for those of you listening,
yeah,
as easy as the CNC is, it is
yeah,
so much easier to just put this thing in a jig
mhm.
and cut it with a router. Like,
Such a such a beautiful example. Like,
it
it's like we've come it's almost like we're full circle.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, now, sometimes hand doing it by quote, unquote, I'm doing air quotes now, doing it by hand with a jig and a router like we used to do back in the
Mhm.
1900s, you know? Sometimes that is faster, and you know what? It's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Even
okay. Do you know how many times I have thrown a jig and screwed it down to the table of my CNC and
of
used a hand
course.
router?
You've all done it. There's a reason everyone has a wood top workbench.
That's right.
I mean, so you could screw tools to the top of it. Everybody does it. It's weird because the charcuterie board that I'm going to Al's shop tomorrow
Mhm,
to use Clarice, the big Laguna laser, to
mhm,
engrave. But the reason that all of this has come to be is because I didn't do it on the CNC. I
right,
used my bandsaw, a Forstner bit, a router,
mhm,
and, a table saw. I
and it
used
looks great.
old school techniques. I did
Yeah,
not use any
yeah,
digifab to put it together.
yeah. Check out his Instagram, it looks great.
It's a purdy board. I can't wait to have it engraved and finished so that I can take beauty shots of this one. It's
Yeah,
really just a big piece of Padook with a stripe of cherry down it, but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just a it's just pretty.
yeah. No, it
It's
looks
just
good.
pretty.
Did you say, like you said, Clarice? Did we tell everybody that the Swift is Hannibal? Like, have they
Oh,
put
I
that
mean,
together?
I just call it Hannibal to
Yeah, yeah,
everybody, so
yeah.
it's just
Yeah, it's Hannibal because he's smart and debonair and classical and all that kind of stuff. And if you get close enough to him, he will eat you.
Oh, yes. Oh,
that's
yes.
where that's where that started.
And then, somebody very clever that who's, a literal genius, very good looking, suggested that you call the other one Clarice because you already had Hannibal. So he's
Yeah,
trying to come up with a name. I'm like, "How could you call it anything but Clarice?"
this is true.
I
This
was
is
like,
true.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. That makes perfect sense, actually." Um Yeah, man, it's I love your vibe with your tools. I love watching you go. I loved when you made the first round of tee boxes and I was in your shop with you
Mhm.
and I was watching I watched your process and you were showing me all the crazy jigs and cutouts. There's one right now. For those of you watching the video version, these are the things that Al and I were sitting on with coffee painting rings on. But
And
yeah, man, it's wild, you could use a CNC knowing nothing about woodworking. You totally could.
yeah, I
But
don't know a lot about woodworking.
you're not gonna get a lot out of a CNC though if you have no woodworking
Yeah,
knowledge.
yeah, yeah,
Because having the woodworking knowledge kinda teaches you what to do with the CNC. Like, what do you need to accomplish to make this a thing? "Oh,
yeah,
I need to make a jig to align this."
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
if you don't know how to do that, the CNC, yeah, you could do it. You're gonna have garbage when you're done with it.
yeah.
You're gonna have lopsided, cockeyed everything. It's not
Mhm.
gonna look good at all. You know
And another thing a CNC will do for you too is it keeps you honest. Like, there are, you do make a point. I jest when I say I don't know anything. I don't feel like I know anything. I feel like an amateur and a novice. I have a lot of years of experience. Are there people that I'm better at woodworking at? I'm sure. There's toddlers
Mhm.
in the world still. But
Some
there are,
people are still wearing diapers. They don't
yeah,
work they don't know how to
there
do
are a lot.
anything.
Yeah, there are a lot of people better than me. I mean, I try to be. I'm not trying to be humble, but I'm not. I know my place in life, I think, but I you do have to know like a climb cut with a router. You got to know that sometimes you don't cut this type of wood in this direction. The beauty of a CNC is it will tell you that faster as the piece explodes.
Oh yeah.
you know, and for me, really fast, big explosion pieces of wood make me learn really fast.
I will s That's an interesting point. That's actually an interesting point because the one thing you do learn is that processes matter. With
yeah.
digital fab stuff, processes, they're the most important thing.
hmm
With the Glowforge, one of the things I learned real quick, and it's funny because the Glowforge is much better now from they've done so many updates on it in the 4 years that I've had mine. Um,
hmm
but when I first got it, when I first got the damn thing, I couldn't rely on it to cut anything smaller than 3 inches.
hmm
Like, it was useless for cutting small things, like,
hmm
and I don't mean bad, I mean literally useless. It was not accurate in any way, and the big thing was everybody was making cardboard jigs to place everything on the honeycomb tray because it was just like, "Yeah, this is useless." Like, you can't
hmm
rely on this thing to cut accurately. Now I've seen people engraving on grains of rice to prove how accurate it is. Like,
Wow.
it's
Wow.
that much more accurate
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But one of the things you learned very quickly in the beginning was place your stuff straight
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
machine ain't going to straighten it for you.
No.
And you're going
And
to have
and
everything crooked.
and the beauty and the curse and the beauty of digital fab, in my case, like we keep coming back to the CNC and the laser,
hmm
is they only do exactly what you
Yeah.
tell them to do.
Damn
So there
machines.
is, when you're hand tool working, and again, I'm not. This is not to crap on hand tool workers at all, but like you have time to think about what the next step is as you're
Right.
working
Right.
before you and I hit the start button, we have to have make sure
All of it.
all is lined up. Because when he gets to step 7,522, if it's wrong, he's going to keep going.
He's going to get to 7,523 in 3
Yeah,
minutes
yeah,
and
yeah,
he ain't stopping.
yeah.
Another thing that, it's little things like that you learn, like even with the Glowforge, like one of the things you learn is your material's never completely flat. And you think it is until you put it on this metal tray and you're like, "Oh, wow, that is not flat at all." So it's like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna cut it, then I'm gonna engrave it." No, dumbass, don't do that.
Yeah,
Don't cut it, then engrave it because the second you cut it, it drops 5 millimeters.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're
Mhm.
talking about a laser beam that's focused 5 millimeters above where it's burning, all of a sudden your burns look like garbage. And
Yeah,
you don't know this, right? Until
yeah,
you F up enough of them where
yeah.
you go, there's got to be something I'm doing wrong. And then some genius person will on YouTube not just do that, but they'll explain why you do the engrave first, then the
Mhm.
cut. And you go, oh.
And you know why? Because they have three of them screwed to their ceiling already. I mean, that's the way. No, no, that's the way it works.
True.
I've gotten literal Instagram messages. Hey, just so you're real, you might not want to do that. This is what happened to me, and I'll
Mm.
be darned if I hadn't stopped the process and went, oh wow, that was going to snap off and it was going to fly across the room. You
Yeah.
know, thanks for the help.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's trolls everywhere. But
Of
yeah,
course.
that flat thing. I love it when people, hey, could you engrave in this slab? I already flattened it, and they bring it to you, and and it's a half an inch of twist, and like in 8 feet, a half an inch doesn't look like that much, but when you send a quarter-inch bit down 8 feet,
Sure.
it started at a quarter-inch deep. Now it's three-quarters of an inch deep, and you just
Yeah.
broke a $60 or $80 bit.
100%. And that's the other thing, like, especially with CNCs, like end mills are expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
Like even cheaper end mills, like most of my end mills, not all of them, but
Mhm,
most of my end mills are Carbide 3D branded. They're the
mhm,
ones that I got with the machine or replaced the ones that came with the machine. But I bought some new Spectra coated Amana bits. I have the Amana RC1145. Like
mhm.
I have some, insert tooling, because
Mhm.
I'm dumb and I don't know how to do anything. So I got it some insert
No,
tooling.
no, no, no. Insert tooling is the greatest thing ever
It
invented.
really is. It really is. Um, but it's very funny, you learn very quickly that, oh, these are expensive. Like I broke the carbide. on the 1145, the very first time I used it. Why did you break it? Did you do it on purpose? No, I'm a dumbass and I didn't know you had to make sure it was tight every time you used the damn blade. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, guess what I do every time I put that in the machine now?
yeah,
That thing gets tightened.
yeah. I have a whole box in my CNC drawer. I have a whole box of broken
Hmm.
carbide steel that
Hmm.
is that box is probably $1,000.
It's crazy. And you break it and then you go, oh. Like the one nice thing about insert tooling is you're just buying the carbide. You're not buying the,
Right,
the bit
right.
over and over again.
Yeah,
But the carbide is, the bit is $80 to $100 and the
yeah,
carbide is 60.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
damn,
I
why did I do I
yeah.
keep doing this?
Well, and that I mean, unfortunately, it's a learning curve. It's kind of like y- y- uh, it's not the same as because you're not getting damaged, but it's the same thing as touching a hot stove.
Right.
Eventually, you know, like when that if you hit yourself in the wallet $100 a time, 2 or 3 times,
Exactly. Yeah.
you tend to go, wait, before I hit start, I'm gonna relook at this tool path.
You what you end up with though, and I don't know if this applies to you, it applies to me 100%, but one of the things that keeps happening with me is I will paralyze myself going over my steps over and over and over.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
especially when I only have like if you I was like I think it was last summer I had a tray that I was making and
Mhm.
I called Al. I'm like, listen, I need to come up. We need to do this on Hannibal, and I need your help. I said because I don't have any cherry left except for this. This is the only piece of cherry I have left.
Yeah, no
This
pressure,
has to work on the first try,
no
and
pressure at all.
yeah, we cannot screw this up. It has to work. And he's like, bring it up.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I went up.
I looked for cherry in my shop while he was driving
Yeah, and for the record, he had none.
up.
Um, but it's really just that. I mean, I was so paralyzed that I didn't even want to put it on my machine. I was like, I need a second set of eyes to look at this because I know how easily this can go
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and there's nothing wrong with it. I've sent files to people and said, "Hey, would you look at this? Because it's
Hmm.
not making sense to me."
Hmm.
You know.
I
Um.
do I do dumb stuff like that all the time. Like you make something, you want to engrave the back of it, and then you don't mirror it. Well,
Oh
there
yeah.
you go. Throw
Oh
that
yeah.
away.
Right there.
And it's funny because when I first got the Glowforge, it's like I don't understand why everyone engraves on the back. You learn real quick that engraving on the back is the right way to do it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it looks nicer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
cleaner.
Yep.
And you don't understand again, that's one of those things that you learn over time. All these little things you learn over time. And now it's like I've been watching, I'm not going to name the YouTuber, but one of my favorite YouTubers just started doing videos on the Glowforge. And I feel like everything she does with the Glowforge is everything I did wrong when I got mine.
Hmm.
And she keeps doing it over and over. And I keep putting comments like, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't. And
Hmm.
she keeps doing it. It's like, I'm not trolling you. I
Yeah.
have 4
Yeah.
years with that machine. I know that machine better than a lot of people know that machine.
That's a very interesting. Isn't it interesting, or do you find it interesting that like I'm 2016, so 5 6 years with
Hmm.
with this machine, 1 year with the laser, literally.
Yeah.
So I'm new, but I've got shop experience. My Woodworks has been around since, I mean, I started in the basement, 15 years ago. But I remember when I was just doing, I was making, I was kicking out 3 cutting boards a week. I was,
Nice.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
That's some epic
So
output there.
I would start commenting to people like, hey, you could be a little more efficient, blah, 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 blah. And now 10 years later, I'm like, what an idiot. Because you know what? I've got some guy in a basement who's made 3 cutting boards sending me a text saying, hey, couldn't you do this? And like, now I can go, you know what? Thanks, man. I appreciate that advice. I'll look into it. I'm glad you're paying attention. Good for you. Because now I can step back and say, you know what? I was there. And
Hmm.
now I can also look at people upstream
Yeah.
and go, you know what? That's what they're seeing me going, you know what? I was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
It's the I always use it. It's the, Frank Shamrock rule of training. You train with 2 people, one that's better than you and one that's not as good as you. You learn from the one that's better than you, and you
Yeah,
teach the one that's not as good as you are.
yeah, yeah,
I'm not an expert on anything. I'm not. I'm literally not. I don't claim to be.
yeah,
But I do promise you that if I'm offering you advice on something you're doing, I know what I'm talking about, because if I have taken the time to actually talk to you
yeah.
about your processes,
Mhm.
I'm giving you useful information, I promise you.
Yeah,
I never waste people's time. I don't wanna just give you a tip, or it's not worth it, right? But
yeah.
if I'm looking at something going, "Oh, no, I've been down this road. I know what this looks like. I know the problems you're gonna have. I had those problems. I'm trying to stop you from having those problems." You know?
Ladies and gentlemen, this statement has been fact checked, and it is true.
I mean, it's true. If I've never corrected somebody on something that's a
No,
mistake that I didn't make.
no, no.
Never. I've never, and the reason I correct people is because I wish people would have stepped in and corrected me.
Listen, I'm standing in front of the laser yesterday talking to you going, I want to do this thing because there's an issue coming
Mhm,
down the line here.
mhm.
And you aren't even looking at the damn machine and said, well, what's going to happen when it goes over here and over? And I'm like, damn it.
Well, yeah, so Al and I, this is really funny, like, this is, by the way, this is the experience talking, right?
Mhm,
This
mhm.
is me going, "Okay." So Al and I were working on something on Clarice, and we were trying to come up with a solution for a potential issue that we both can't believe is an issue. We're probably just both looking at this wrong.
I hope.
Um, but we Al had a good idea, and he starts giving me the idea, and in my head, I'm visualizing what he's talking about, and I'm like, "That's not gonna work."
Mhm.
And he's going, "Yeah, yeah, so what we need to do," and I'm like, "It's not gonna work." I'm just going in my head, I'm like, That's just not gonna
Yeah.
work." So I'm like, "Al, what happens if blah, blah?" "Well, you just" "No, no, Al, just what happens if it doesn't do that?" And then
And
the
I
next
turned it
message
on.
I get is, "Oh,
Yeah.
crap."
Yeah. I turned it on and it didn't do that. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, yep.
He goes, "Oh, crap.
Yeah.
That's not gonna work." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, good." Because I felt like, because then the other thing, and I even said it to you, I was like, one of the things that happened while we were having that conversation is I was asking questions. I was starting to feel like I was just being belligerent. It's like, but I wasn't. I was literally
Yeah.
trying to convey,
No.
like, I don't think it's always gonna work that way. And
And I think I think we learn how to throttle ourselves. Like if
yeah.
you were talking to somebody you didn't know, you
Mhm.
wouldn't approach them as firmly as you approach me.
Right. I would have just probably just said, "Okay, you do you."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's it.
Or,
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to work. Or maybe like, look at this, check this out.
Right.
Whereas me, we know each other well enough that you could say, yeah, that's not going to work. And I'm like, yeah, no, 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 it'll work. And you're like, no, it's not going to
It's
work.
not gonna work.
And I
It's not.
literally had to come out here and turn it on and go, huh, that's not going to
Well
work.
will you look at that? The old man's got it.
But this is back to the community.
Mhm.
Like if I had to figure out half of this by myself, I
Sure.
wouldn't. I wouldn't be anywhere today.
I don't think anybody in this community
Hmm.
can say that they are where they are on their own. I
No,
don't care who you are,
look,
because
just my photography equipment alone,
yeah.
I would have wasted so much money
Sure. Sure.
buying 3 or 4 cameras before I figured out that, hey, Vincent, what camera do I need to buy? Vincent said, not only do you need to buy this one, here's the link.
Yeah, here's the link, get this camera, here's
Yeah,
the lights, get
yeah,
this, and here's the
yeah.
box you need to put your
There's the
crap in to
lights,
take
there's the
pictures of.
camera, there's the stand. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's again, and the one thing I it's really funny because I give him a tripod and he goes, "I really need to spend that much on it?" Yes, you do.
yeah,
Okay, I'll get
yeah.
the tripod. And so far, I've not heard one complaint about the tripod, right?
Not one. And 3 people have borrowed it and used it. And where did you get that tripod?
Yeah, and
I'll
and
ask my
it's
buddy.
it's really interesting because I've been doing photography since the early 2000s.
You've spent all the money already
I
that we
did.
didn't have
I
to spend.
I did all the going to school. I
Yep.
did all the research. I
Yeah.
screwed everything
Yeah.
up. I did it. I've done this so many times that I've learned my lesson. I did it with 3D printers. My
Yep.
3D printer journey is thus. I bought 4 3D printers to avoid spending the money on a Prusa.
Hmm.
and
I
I
know.
ended up with a Prusa, and I will never buy anything but a
Yeah,
Prusa,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And you will advise people who are interested in 3D printers, just buy the Prusa.
Buy the Prusa
Yeah.
now. You're gonna buy it later.
And you know what? We do this in life too. Some of us,
Sure.
those of you listening, with families and everything. I tell my daughter, who is 30 years old, we get into arguments all the time. My stepdaughter is here local, and we'll get into arguments all the time. And I literally just say, honey, I can't tell you what to do with your life in your life,
Right.
but I can tell you what mistakes I made.
Sure.
You're going to make your own. There's no reason to make the ones I made.
That's the thing. That's
you're
it right
you're
there.
going to screw enough up on your own. You don't need to screw up the stuff I did.
Exactly. Learn
you know?
that is the one thing that I will say that is the one thing that my parents were very good at with me. They let me make my own mistakes,
Yeah.
but they didn't let me make their mistakes.
Right. Right.
And it's
Right.
the same with the people that I love in the maker community, the people that I
Exactly.
look at as people that I've learned from, the people who have
Yeah.
inspired me. I have
And
learned from them because they've already screwed these things up.
I was just going to say, and if you really think about it, every time someone gives us advice or we learn something from someone or teach someone, we're not teaching something we know. We're teaching something we know won't work.
Yeah, most of the time.
I mean, most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah.
Like I might not be able to answer that specific question, but I can tell you these three ways aren't going to work because I've tried them.
And this is why I love the group of people that we've
Hmm.
chosen to surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
Like even talking to people at Maker Camp. Like I was talking to I was with Dave from Atomic Airship Works.
Hmm.
He won he got he won something beautiful in the Maker Swap.
Oh,
And
nice.
I got to chat with the guy that made it because I had to know how he did it. Like he won this Starbond glue thing. It was a Starbond glue stand, and it was for all the Starbond products. It was a spot for every single one,
Uh-huh.
and it was made of walnut and resin, and it was unbelievable. It was so beautiful, and the finish on it was so impressive.
Hmm.
And I was standing next to him in line, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I made that," and I'm like, okay, we were waiting to get our picture taken by Mark Adams, and I'm like, "I need to know how you got that finish." He goes, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I need to know how you got that finish. Like, what's the process that got that beautiful finish on the resin? Because I've been trying to get that
Yeah.
finish
Does it look like
for
French polish or
years."
something?
So what he got this amazing matte finish on it. And if you've ever worked with resin, you know that getting a matte finish on resin is and having it look consistent and nice is
Not
impossible.
swirly. Yeah,
But
not
he didn't
swirly.
just get a nice matte finish. That matte finish of resin blended into the matte finish on the wood.
Wow.
Absolutely wild.
Huh.
Absolutely wild. So, yeah, it was crazy, and I was freaking out, and then I got to talk to the guy that did it, and now I understand his process. So the next time I make something with resin and wood mixed together, I know
Mhm.
exactly how to finish it to get that
See,
finish.
and you just saved, a few steps of school.
And and the crazy thing is he doesn't know who I am.
Yeah,
For all
yeah.
he knows, I'm writing a book and I'm gonna steal his thing and make money off, right? But
Mhm,
it didn't matter at that moment because it's like, "No, I have information, you want information. Let's
mhm,
come together. I'm gonna share it with you."
mhm. My thing of the week, the guy I made a couple of years ago. I made a flip over stool CNC,
Mhm,
like a
mhm.
like a flat pack flip over stool that my great grandmother had as a kid. When I was a kid, it was an enamel, steel enamel, very Art Deco piece. I made one out of plywood, and he did a similar thing. It was mine is a chair that flips into a step stool. His is a small step stool that the feet pop out of. Like they're on like a cantilever kind of thing.
Okay.
And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not having." He goes, "I made this. I got I have to adjust the tab and slot.
Mhm. Of course.
We're only doing it in wood instead of acrylic here." He goes, I got to adjust these here, and was asking about bit and speeds and stuff like that. And I was like, man, that's a really cool idea. I actually made one, but it's a chair. And he's like, oh, that's an awesome idea. And he goes, I haven't gotten any very much interest in mine. If did you do well with yours? I said I didn't sell any. And he's like, what do you think about trading? I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I'll give you my file, you give me your file. Now we both have both kinds. Maybe we can, you
It's
know.
amazing.
And I was like, you know what? What's your email?
Why the hell not?
you know. So now I'm going to build his stool. He's going to build my stool. I'm curious to see what tweaks, like how he may better my design, and maybe I can better his design.
Sometimes I'll do something like that. Somebody will be working on something. Jeff, a weird guy, just recently made something for Justin Bare Naked,
hmm
and it was a really cool piece of wall art. It was beautiful,
Yeah.
and he sent me artwork, and he's like, we need to modify this though," and I'm like, "Okay," and I started working on it, and I realized very quickly that I wasn't just going to be able to just modify what he sent me, so I
hmm
essentially started over with that as a guide, right?
hmm
And one of the craziest parts of doing that was I was learning so much as I was doing. I'm like, oh, no, okay, I can cut a corner here.
hmm
And you won't because I had to keep in mind one of the things you learn very quickly when you're dealing with CNCs and lasers is that you're making silhouettes. Everything is a silhouette.
hmm
Everything is a shape,
hmm
right?
hmm
So if something you take two things and stick them together, as long as it's one continuous shape, you're good.
Yeah.
You don't it doesn't have to be colored, it doesn't matter. You
hmm
just have to have a path for the tool to move along.
hmm
And as I was doing, I'm like, "Wow." I finished it up and I'm looking at it on the screen and I just go, "Wow, you've learned a lot in a couple of years." Like, because that would have just take I think I did it, it took me about an hour.
Yeah.
It took
Yeah.
me about an hour of just sitting here with my tablet and just in Illustrator, just tweaking until I was happy with it. I sent it to him and he's like, "It's exactly what I needed."
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, and that part, I didn't know what you were gonna do." So I made a double outline at one point because I didn't know how he wanted to handle it.
hmm
But I knew that he was gonna do it on the CNC. So I'm like, "Okay,
hmm
here's your 2 options, or you could just do the whole option here and make one piece to go in here."
hmm
And it felt
So
so good to have thought of that
yeah.
when I
Yeah.
handed it to him. It's like, "Oh, no, I already ran the case study through my head, like, how would I
Mhm.
do what would I wanna do if I was making this out of wood? Well, there's 2 ways to do this. I'll give you the option to do both. With one
Mhm.
click of delete, you've already gotten rid of one of them if you don't wanna use it."
Right.
And
So if I'm hearing you right, you've kind of just explained like a hive mind
yeah,
mentality. Like the maker world is very hive minded.
100%.
You know,
Huh.
like it's not that I don't need to learn or shouldn't learn how to 3D print, but
Mhm.
right now at this level and in my life and the space I have, my brain is like, I don't need to learn how to use a 3D printer. I've got a
Huh.
Vincent.
Yeah, yeah.
you,
No,
you know,
it's
you know,
100% true, and
you don't need a bigger laser because right now you can drive up here and use this one.
100%, which is
You know,
what's gonna happen tomorrow.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
and but also there is an understanding that if you start coming up here 2 times a week, now you need a bigger laser.
no, 100%, 100%. And that's the funny part, like, I love that we have a community where, like, you become, like, almost a mini expert on something,
Yeah.
and I've actually had people come up to me and go, "Hey, I'm working on something, I'm gonna need down the road, I'm gonna need somebody that can do this in Adobe Illustrator, can you handle it?" "Yeah,
I
okay,
don't know how
cool."
many conversations I've had with people, and this is again, I guess I'll puff up on the host here. I more often than not have been in conversations with people and had someone ask me a question, and I will just go, I don't know, but I'll ask Vincent later.
Yeah,
you know, because I know specifically camera questions. You
sure,
know,
sure.
like N- I don't know. I don't have anybody in my life who has been through more cameras and and used each and every one of them.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know lots of people who collect things,
Oh,
but
100%.
you are able to say the Nikon blah 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 will do this, won't do that. The
Mhm.
Canon blah 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 will
Yeah.
do this, won't do that. Whereas I had when I was looking for cameras before I started even confiding in you because I didn't think you would want to give me the time of day because you were. You know what I mean? I was
Was
not
wild
ashamed.
times when you went camera shopping, I will say that.
Yeah, and and people were like, "Oh, you got to get an Nikon or you got to get a Canon." I had a
Mm,
guy trying to get me to buy a lens that the very first thing you taught me was that lens was a piece of garbage and not worth the $500. Like
yes.
that would just have been the biggest waste of money you would ever.
100% would have been a huge waste of
See,
money.
you know what lens I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. It was the 7300. It was I always get the number wrong because they made a
Right.
second version. It's very
Yep.
funny. They made a
Yep.
second version of that lens that is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
it. But the first version
Yeah, and this
is
guy was like,
hot
"If you get
garbage.
it, you gotta get this lens. You gotta
Yeah.
get it. This has gotta be your first lens. If you don't
Nope.
get it, you'll be chasing pictures." And
Yeah. No.
thank God,
No.
you know.
Nope. Nope.
So I guess the point is in this maker community, like I trust Vincent and I have a very
Yeah.
good relationship, and he has never steered me wrong, and I hope I haven't steered him wrong.
Nope.
But you should verify and do your own research when you get advice from people.
My philosophy is this: use the knowledge people have, but don't rely on it. Use it. Like,
Mhm,
okay, Al taught me how to do this with cutting boards. Okay, well, he taught me how to do it. Okay. Maybe I need to tweak this a little bit, but
mhm,
I understand. I think the thing you need to do as we wind up the conversation, I think the big thing, especially with digital fab stuff, is not to understand the how, it's to understand the why. Why do you have to zero things correctly?
mhm,
Why do you have to put a wedge in your glow forge up against the inside wall so when you put your cutting board, oh, it's so that it's square to the head so that when it cuts straight.
mhm,
How many cutting boards did I cut crooked before I realized, like, oh, I could just put a piece of wood there
mhm,
and that piece of wood resting up against the inside wall? And that's a stop that will make sure that it is straight,
mhm.
perpendicular to everything.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Very good advice. Very
it
good
it
advice.
it yeah, you take the process and understand the process more than understand being able to repeat the process.
Mhm.
Because if you understand the process makes a whole lot more sense. You know what process always makes a lot of sense though? The
What's that?
process of giving out our things of the week. And yes, everyone, things of the week are still a thing. We Everybody loves things of the week. They love all the cool stuff that we recommend. They love that I always make them spend money. I don't think Al's going to make them spend money this week though. So Al, what is your thing of the week?
Well, my thing of the week in classic Ethan Carter style is things of the week. It's two.
For 2 episodes in, we're already breaking the rules. Go ahead.
Well, I the reason I and thank you for giving me the leeway to do two. I would have done one if you told me no, do one. But my reasoning for doing two is there are a lot of incredible makers out there that have incredibly large followings and stuff like that. And while they excite me, they don't need my support kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
me
100%.
using them as a thing of the week is not going to push them down the road any.
Fair enough.
And then I do have one that I feel very strongly about that has a very tiny channel that I have no idea why. I cannot figure it out for the life of me. So,
Okay.
my
Let's
big
rock and
channel
roll.
is and I picked this person because his filmography on YouTube is unmatched
Okay.
by less, like there might be two other people on YouTube filming as clean and as crisp as this person. And while he does everything by hand right now, he uses digital media to show like he does like extrusions in computer generated. This is how the machine works that I'm building by hand, and that
Okay.
is ClickSpring.
Click spring. That sounds
ClickSpring.
familiar.
He's on YouTube under ClickSpring, and his Instagram is ClickSpring1. He's building an Antikythera
Wow.
calendar. He's been working
Okay.
on it for years, but
That's about how long it would take to make one, and it won't
oh,
be
years.
done.
He's been doing this process for years, but it's almost like ASMR. It's like you just watch this and then you're like, oh my god, an hour and a half went by. you know? So that's the big channel. He's got very big following and everything like that. But my real actual thing of the week is an Instagram channel called Colorado Multicraft.
Ah, so for those of you not paying attention, he
Uh-huh.
won your giveaway when you hit 2,000.
Uh-huh.
He won your giveaway.
Lars did?
Yeah.
He did. Oh my
He he's
god.
probably listening right now going, "Yeah, Al, I did."
Lars Coleman.
Lars Coleman.
I don't think he has 300 on Instagram, and people, he should have 20,000. The things this man does with a CNC is
It's
amazing.
wild. He's a
Is
good
amazing.
dude too.
And he is almost yeah, he's 100% digital fab. He just bought Clarice. He just bought an MX. Uh
Nice.
100
He's
100
got
watt MX.
287 followers. That's criminal.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, people, and he doesn't, like, he's not on, he doesn't push it, and he's very humble, but hyper intellectual, super guy. If you need information, if you need help, if you need anything, Lars is an amazing, amazing person.
100%. Lars is one of the good guys. Absolutely one of
Yeah,
the good guys. I completely agree.
and he's the one
Uh,
I'm going to trade files with.
he's I've posted stuff in my stories from time to time,
Uh-huh.
as when I'm in dark places, and I always get like a thumbs up or like a cheer up kind of
It's
thing from
always
him.
was.
He's just he's a solid dude.
Yeah, he very,
I
very,
completely
yeah,
completely agree.
yeah,
Excellent choice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's my things of the week.
Nice. My thing of the week is another thing that's going to make you spend money. Um, yeah. So if you listen to Because We Make for any length of time, you know that I had a love hate minus the love relationship with resin 3D printing. Resin 3D printers are a pain in the ass. That's the only way to describe it. There are nothing but a pain in the ass. They are wonderful. They print incredible levels of detail. You can go super small and do amazing things, but they're a pain in the ass. They make a mess. They stink, and a lot of times they fail.
Mhm.
I've had two different ones. The first one I never got it to print successfully. I literally never got a successful print off of it. And gave it to a friend of mine because I just wanted it out. He took it. His success rate with it is 50%, which
Wow.
means half the time he's printing with it, he gets a print fail. So I got a second one. Again, never got a successful print out of it. I literally never got it. And I finally said, I'm not dealing with resin anymore. I know how to 3D print stuff. I'm just going to keep using. One day I watched a YouTube video and I saw a resin 3D printer made by Frozen 3D called the Sonic Mini 8K. It's
Hmm.
an 8K screen on this thing.
Hmm.
And I was like, and the guy that did it basically showed the setup process. It took him 10 minutes to set it up, and he was making prints that were unbelievable on day one with it. I'm like, all right, it's only a $500 printer, and I really do want to start doing like making my own molds for jewelry. And the only way to do that is with a resin printer. So I'm going to get this printer. I got it. And I
Nice.
will say the quality that this thing can print
Wow.
is ludicrous. I'll put a picture of this on maybe in my Instagram at some point just to show off what it's capable of. This thing is, I'm showing Al on the screen. If you're watching the video version, you can see it on the video.
That
This is about an inch and a half tall. And you
wow.
can see, like, you look at the back, you
You
can
can see his
see
fingernails. Yeah.
on his robe. Come on, focus. There we go. You can see texture on his robe.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. This
That's
printer is
bizarre.
absolutely 100% beyond the shadow of a doubt the most ridiculous thing that's I've ever owned.
You almost can't cast that clean.
I mean, if I cast that with pewter, it's not going to be as clean as the print that I made the mold from, which
Right,
is a
right,
good problem to have.
right, right.
That's a good problem to have. I'm
That's
perfectly
amazing.
fine
That's
having
amazing.
that as my problem. But
Yeah.
yeah, so the Frozen Sonic Mini 8K, it's about $569.
Mhm,
Um, and the resin I used, I was smart. I bought Frozen's resin with it.
mhm.
I figured if I'm gonna go into this, I'll stay in an ecosystem if I get good results. So far, this printer hasn't failed on anything I've tried to print with it. So I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a resin 3D printer. I know everyone likes the Elegoo Mars printers. I didn't have a lot of luck with them. Jeff, a weird guy. We've talked about Jeff so much on this episode. He should be an honorary host.
You should, yeah, I was going to say, you should have him on as a guest.
But Jeff has a lot of luck with his. So we bought ours at the same time. Mine is gone. He still uses his. So,
Yeah.
to each their own. Some people have luck, some don't.
Well, he's a weird guy.
He is a weird guy, and weird guys do tend to get things done. So I'll have a link to that in the show notes. You'll be able to jump onto Amazon and order it. I think I'll put a link to the resin I use too, because the resin I use is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of good luck with it, and the finish on it is super nice. But
Sounds like a really cool machine.
it is a really cool machine. It's a pain in the ass. I'm not going to lie. It's a pain in the ass, but every resin printer is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But
I've never 3D printed anything. I don't even know what they look like other than pictures.
yeah, we're going to get you a 3D printer soon. I talked you into a laser, and you think I'm a genius, right?
Yeah.
Start making your own jigs with a 3D printer. You're going to be selling corner hole jigs that compete with mine. Then I'll have to kill you. But you know who I'm not going to kill?
Who's that?
The people who subscribe to this podcast. That's right.
Do you have anybody subscribing here?
We have financial supporters, and I gotta say, this is something that blows my mind. I know this. We're talking about this like this wasn't talked about last week with Jimmy on the show,
Yeah.
but it wasn't, because this one was recorded first. But anyway, we have financial supporters of this show, and one of the craziest things to me is that all I did was put out episode 0 and explain why this show needed to be financially successful. And people answered the call, and I really appreciate the people that did. So the people that answered the call are Matthew Serio from Artigiano Serio. Yeah, I pronounce it correctly, unlike everyone else. Can I just say, by the way,
You can.
he's just one of the nicest freaking dudes on the planet.
Is he?
He just really is one. He came up to me at Maker Camp, and he said, "Vincent, hi, how you doing?" Now, I for those of you that don't know or weren't paying much attention, I made a yellow shirt with my logo on the back of it, and I told people, just come up to me, because I don't know what any of you look like. Like, I knew a couple of people, and people were coming up to me, and he came up to me. I'm like, I do I know you? It's like, it's Matt Serio, and I'm like, oh my god, okay, now I know what you look like. I've definitely, and I had met him at Jimmy's and didn't even realize I had met him already once before. But so, and he's on the terabyte plan. You guys can go look that up on the website and see what that means.
Do that.
Jeremy Speece, Jake Drews from Make with Jake, Rory Langefeld of RLL Woodworks and DIY, Robert J. Keller, Rebecca Cole, Meg and Chris of Onyx Design Studios, more friends from Maker Camp. I love those two.
Awesome people.
I spent most of my time with them, and it was it was a hoot. Brian Arsenault of Seven Hills Maker, and the very first person to support the podcast when I opened up subscriptions, Jeff Stein, aka a weird guy.
A weird guy.
He did not buy placement on this episode, even though it sounds like he did. But yeah, I appreciate everyone that supports the show financially. It means the world to me. You guys, when I said I needed this show to be financially successful, you guys ponied up, and damn it means the world to me, and I appreciate it so much. If you can't support the show financially, that's fine. I understand that's not something everyone's capable of doing, but you can share the show, let people know that it's back. By all means, leave a review for the reboot. If you're interested, that would be cool. You can leave multiple reviews. Some people leave 3 reviews for a show. I would be happy to get new reviews and be able to talk about that with people again. So, head on over to whatever podcast platform you get your shows from, and by all means, listen. Al, it has been an absolute hoot.
Hey, can I just say thank you? This is you had me as a guest on Because We Make, and now I'm honored to, even though I'm technically episode 2, the first recording.
You are the first recording, but you are episode 2. Yes.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Jeff? But no, I am so happy, and it's funny. We did mention Jeff a lot this show.
We did.
But, within minutes of you signing off of the last podcast, Jeff reached out and was like, what do we need to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to fix this? And I was like, I don't know. And I mean, you could talk to him, and I hope I'm not talking out, but we were like, maybe we can do like we were going to replay because we make as a
Yeah,
service, kind of thing, so we myself I'm saying, but a lot of people are really excited that you're back.
they really
Wel-
are.
Welcome
I
back,
I
buddy, and we
I will say
appreciate it.
this. I will say this. I had no intention of bringing a podcast back. I really
I know.
didn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You actually asked me the night of. You actually called me on the phone the
Hmm.
night I ended the show, and you're like, "Bro, why are you blowing up your life?" I'm like, "I'm not blowing up my life. I just need to put this to bed for a little while."
And you did, and it's good.
And one day I got the bug up my butt. I'm like, "Okay, I want to start doing this again. Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
go. All right, I've been out of this for 2 months. Let's do this."
yeah.
I didn't have any intention. This wasn't a great publicity stunt. It wasn't,
And I don't
obviously
think anybody does think that. So
I just want to make sure. I want to
yeah,
make sure there's
yeah.
no, and also it's not a way for me to play sympathy cards to get cash. This is what my life is right now.
Yep, yep,
This podcast needs to be a thing,
yep.
and you guys are making it a thing. So when I get the feedback, when I got the feedback after the show ended, and people were like, "You dude, I'm sad. Like this was something I looked forward to every week."
Hmm.
I didn't realize how many people the show mattered to. Like I knew how many people listened. I
Hmm.
listen to a lot of things that don't matter to me. I
Yeah.
really do. I'm not, they're background noise, they're a routine, but there were so many people that were just like,
Hmm.
"Oh, this podcast meant so much to me." He goes, "I loved what you did. A lot of people thought it was something with my health. My health is fine for now."
Hmm. Hmm.
I always say for now because you never know.
You do. Yeah.
Um, but everything is fine except the job situation, and
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I
And
really appreciated it.
I think while the last podcast was amazing and important to most all of us, um, I will say kudos and a great direction with digitally creative. I think this space needs to be discussed, and I think you could do a whole show on why you need to zero something. I think that's
Yeah,
important. We take that kind of stuff for granted now.
I think
Zero.
my goal for this show isn't to just do digital fabrication,
Hmm.
but it's the convergence of technology and creativity in making. Like
It's
all
part.
those things, I
Yeah,
want to talk about how technology has become a creative tool for people.
yeah. It's a part of
And
our lives now. Yeah,
yeah, it is. It
yeah,
is. And I think that the more we resist, the more opportunities we're going to miss out on.
yeah.
And I want people to get excited about it. I want people to be as excited about this stuff as I
Yeah,
am.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I mean,
it
we're
feels
creating
nice.
on cell phones now.
Sure. Sure. It feels nice. It does feel nice to be doing a podcast again. So,
Good for you.
and the number of people who have already said they're going to be on it is just absolutely fantastic. So, I probably have guests figured out for the rest of the year already, which
That's
is
awesome, man. Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
It's
that's
crazy.
awesome.
But
I do want 52 and 102 if I can if I can reserve them.
oh, and I will say this just for the record, I want to say this on the record
Yeah,
on the show. I appreciate tremendously everything that Ethan and Brooke did for Because We Make.
good. Yeah, yeah. Great
I
people.
I want to make that 100% clear.
Yeah.
Uh, I could not be where I am today doing this again
Hmm.
if it wasn't for those two.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
just want to just express my appreciation to both of them
yeah,
because this show exists because I had the best partners in getting to where it was when it ended. So
yeah, yeah.
I just want to make sure everyone understands. I love both of them. Everything is cool. Nobody's bleeding. Everything's fine. That's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Al, thank you so much for joining me. I will, of course, have all of Al's links in the show notes. I don't need to ask him what they are. And God, at this point, if you need to ask me Al's links, just where you been,
Yeah,
bro? Where you been?
yeah. Go give
Al's
somebody a
been a
hug.
Al's been a fixture in my life. He's one of my closest friends, and I think if you want to find an interesting guy to follow and you're bored with who you're following already, get on over and follow Al at NY Woodworx on Instagram. And that's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will be back again next week with another guest. I think I know who it might be. We'll figure it out then. Have a great week, everybody.